Hey guys, today I want to talk about idea trees and how they can actually help us in League. But this is going to be another example of something that you can apply all over the place in life to try to figure things out. But essentially, what you're going to do is you're going to put at the top, whatever it is that you want to learn more about or form some ideas about. So let's say that I want to be a challenger support player, right? I'm going to put that right at the top. Then I'm going to break down what I think makes a challenger support player with some broad categories. So for example, there's like out of game stuff, what items you're building and what runes you're taking, how you're doing champion select and what you're doing there. Then you get into game and you're laning. For me, it just kind of makes sense. I'm kind of going through chronologically here. You're going to think about what you're doing outside of the game. You're going to think about items and runes before you play the game. You watch a guide or something like that. You go through champion select, then you get into game and you start laning. And then maybe you're roaming, maybe you're communicating with your team a little bit, you're timing some summoner spells, you're placing vision, and then you get into the mid game and you need to be like team fighting and moving around. Now this is an old one. I think you could do a lot better job, and I would probably be better at making a tree for what it takes to be a challenger support player. Now there's some notable things that are missing from here, but essentially you'll come up with these different categories, and then you're going to break these categories down further. So like, well, what do I do outside of game to make me perform better? We've talked about these before. Don't play when you're like too full or hungry. Don't play if you haven't like showered and taken care of hygiene and you feel bad. Like go to the bathroom so you don't have to go to the bathroom during the game. Like get some water. Make sure that you're not mental boomed, as I put on here. Make sure it's like a good temperature for you, etc. Like I even have humidity on here. So there's like a ton of stuff, right? And essentially what you're able to do is you're breaking this down to actionable steps that you can take. And so you're just going to keep breaking these categories down until you have an action that you can take. Like, okay, I'm hungry. I can't play League right now. I go get something to eat. I come back and I try to play. Or I'm too full right now. I just ate. I'm digesting. I'm half asleep. Like, I'm not going to play League right now. Or you go take a shower. You go to the bathroom. You go get yourself some water, right? These are all actions that you can take. For items and stuff like that, we're talking about keeping up with the patch notes and with what optimal builds people are going, watching guides, looking at what items people are building on some websites that have helpful information like op.gg or lolalytics. Maybe you make some item sets for yourself so you don't forget what you learned in game. And you just go through this and you break these down until you have 20, 30, 40, 50 different actions that you can take. To make yourself a better player. And maybe it's so much, you come up with so many ideas that you couldn't possibly actually practice or work on implementing all of these things at once. And that's fine. So just pick like one or two things. Maybe you pick one thing at each stage of the game. But you pick like one thing and just focus on that for a couple of days until it becomes ingrained, and then move on to the next thing once you feel like it's a kind of solid ingrained part of your gameplay. And then you just add more and more things to your game until you're a stronger and a stronger player. What I was actually wanting to look at, which led me to finding this stuff, is I had looked into the types of deaths that you have in League. Because obviously a big way to become a better player is to just not die as much as you are. This one's also old. What I realized is that not only is this not the way that I would break down the types of deaths that exist in League anymore, but I also think it'll be very different for different players in different roles. And so I realized that the only way, for you to follow this is you have to do this yourself. You guys are going to have to go out and think about why you're dying and what types of deaths you're having, build the categories, break them down into simpler things. And then once you've broken them down into actionable steps, pick one or two of those things to do at a time, work on those things until they're a part of your game. It's going to help you a tremendous amount. And like I said, this isn't just something that you can use, to be better at League. It's something that you can use to improve at anything that you're trying to figure out. So I find this to be really helpful. And I think that the way I would break down types of deaths is just completely different than what I had here when I went over and reviewed this. I don't think I overextend nearly as much as I did before. Sometimes if you were to break this down, what this would mean for me is like dying going for a ward that I shouldn't be able to clear, or placing a ward that I shouldn't be able to place. Maybe it's actually overstaying rather than overextending. After play should really be over, we're like up too far, pushed up too far, we're like pushing for too long, or we're trying to make a play in the enemy jungle kind of off tempo is what we would call it nowadays. Those types of plays would fall under this category. I think it can be okay, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't necessarily write it down. I think it can be okay to die team fighting, especially on, tank engaged support. It's part of your job, and so that's not that big of a deal. Same thing with objectives. Like if you're dying over an objective that you need to get that objective, or you're going to lose the game or something like that, it could be okay to die over an objective. The problem is when you're dying over like second Drake Cloud Drake for the enemy team, or third Drake Cloud Drake for the enemy team, when your team is behind and you outscale them. That's like a big mistake. Or like sitting under a turret when it's about to die and it's completely indefensible, and you just die inexplicably trying to defend a turret that you should have known better that you weren't going to be able to defend. What I like to call this is like in chess, there's a term for hung pawns, and that means like a pawn that is just dead no matter what you do. You could try to defend it, but essentially it's just dead, and you're only going to waste your time and your tempo and your turns in order to try to defend a piece that's just gone. And you may even give more pieces as a result of trying to play around defending something that's just completely already lost. And it's the same way in League. So many times we're trying to save a teammate who's just dead, especially as a Braum player. That I love those moments where I'm going in and saving somebody who's at 100 HP and blocking them from being able to kill the person, but actually going for those plays over and over again that are really low probability of helping that person and a high probability of getting you caught with them as well are actually quite bad. And so you need to train yourself out of defending hung pawns in League, whether it's a turret or a dragon or a teammate who's caught out. You want to help them when you have a chance to help them without endangering your team or yourself. But if you're really endangering your team, it's not worth doing it, right? So I was talking about here dying to ganks or roams that I didn't see. So like their mid laner goes missing, I didn't see it on the map, they show up bot and we die. A lot of people are going to just, spam ping their mid laner. They're going to be mad that their mid laner didn't ping that person was missing. If you really care about getting better and you really care about improving the game, you're going to understand one thing about League, which is that, or team sports in general, you have to accept responsibility for everything that's in your control. So if you could have seen that their mid laner left, that's on you, whether your mid laner pinged or not. And you can say that, well, that's not fair. It should be their job to ping it. And it's like easier for them to tell that their person's leaving than it is for me to notice while I'm laning that somebody else in some other lane has just left and where they're going. While that's true, it may be easier for them. The buck has to stop with you. Otherwise, you're going to die and be a victim of your teammates over and over again without ever accepting that you're the only one responsible for how your games go and how you do in the game. And so if you die because you lose track of where their mid laner is, or you die because you don't see their jungler, or you didn't ward, or you didn't account for the fact that we don't know where their jungler is, so we should assume he's potentially here and not play aggressive, you'll see even sometimes people will have a ward, the enemy jungler will walk through the ward, they should have seen it and they don't see it. Their jungler is clear on the other side of the map, and they will blame their jungler just because that person is playing the same role as them, even though junglers aren't like laning versus each other. They don't even have to be in the same place. In fact, a lot of times they're going to be on opposite sides of the map. And so it blows my mind that people are like blaming this jungler because he's on the other side of the map because they got ganked by someone that they should have seen coming, or they played overly aggressive when they didn't know where the enemy jungler was. Things like that. You have to take personal responsibility. If no one takes personal responsibility for these things in a team game, it'll be a tragedy of the commons where nobody takes responsibility and your team continues to do bad, die, and lose the game. And if you want to get better, and if you want to climb and improve as a player, you have to take responsibility for everything that happens to you, because you're the only one that can change and prevent those things from happening to you. Your teammates are going to play like bots, like NPCs, like AI. They're going to play the same way at the same rank always, forever, pretty much. They're just going to play the same way. And so they're not going to ping Mia more because you want them to. You know, you flaming your mid laner from last game is not going to help your next mid laner ping more. The reality is that if you're, you know, in platinum or you're in gold, your mid laner is not pinging Mia most of the time, and it's never going to change. Whether you tell them to do that or not, it's never going to change, because if they were pinging Mia and they were communicating with their team, they probably wouldn't be in that rank. They would probably be higher rank. And even in higher rank, people don't do this stuff. You know, even NA Challenger, NA Grandmaster, it's bad. You know, it's not as good as it could be. People don't pay attention. People are playing for fun sometimes, because they know they can consistently get back to the rank, or they're on another account. It doesn't get better. You have to take personal responsibility. Anyways, I don't know why this ended up being about personal responsibility, but this really bugs me. So you got to use these trees to help you find actionable steps. You can start with the most broad topic you want. It can be related to League. It can be related to life, school, whatever, work, a business, a family, whatever it is. You figure out what you're trying to do, how you want to be, what you want to be, how you want to be perceived, whatever it is. You start with that thing and you break it down into more and more categories, and you break those down into more and more categories. And the more categories you can come up with, the better, because the more categories you end up with at the end, the more actionable steps there will be for you to improve. So if I were to redo this today, it would be a lot bigger than this chart. The Challenger League player chart would be gigantic. I'd have like 20, 30, 40 different things, on the first row, and then we'd be breaking those down into some other things, and maybe not even all of those would be actionable. So then we'd break those down into, a couple of things each. And so we might end up with, obviously, right, if you think about everything that a Challenger League player is doing differently, it's not one or two things. They're doing 100 things differently from you. And those are the 100 actionable steps that you can take to improve, right? So they got their pregame ritual. They're playing, when they're physically in good condition. They're really on top of what items are better than other items. And some of these things, some players are going to be stronger at than others. It doesn't mean that a Challenger player is perfect. Like I just said, they're not perfect, especially in NA. Certain regions have certain weaknesses. Like Korean players are much better mechanically than NA players, but when it comes to itemizations and runes, Korea is way behind the curve. They're not very innovative. They have way better mechanics because they're on lower ping, because they have more people playing on the server, and so it's more competitive. So their mechanics get honed in really, really well, even at lower ranks. But their theory crafting, for whatever reason, that creativity, that theory crafting is not as strong in Korea and in China as it is in the West, as it is in Europe and in NA. It's, you see the vast majority of these crazy champion picks that are climbing, or these meta changing things, or item realizations that, we're building the wrong items and stuff like that. Usually they're coming out of NA or EU. So, if it was me, right, and I was in charge of a team like Cloud9 or something like that, that actually has a chance of doing something at Worlds, I would say focus on that difference. Now we're into a whole nother category of, we're going around the world today. But yeah, that would be where the West's advantage is you need to play champions that minimize mechanical differences in skill, and you need to play a meta-breaking strategy that you've come up with that's creative and presents the Koreans with a challenge that they're not used to, and you need to play that versus them so that they're completely thrown off of their game and have to be creative on the fly, which they're not good at doing. That's the way that you would go about competing with the Korean team. You probably also potentially want to play very aggressive early game champions, even though those tend to be worse in general, because you're going to get out macroed by the Koreans. And so one of the reasons why a team like Gigabyte Marines or whatever was so successful is because they honed in on, like this very aggressive Nocturne jungle. They'd get to level 6 as quickly as possible, and they just all in off of that ult. And so when the Gigabyte Marines out of Vietnam were being extremely successful versus other teams, it's because they were playing this very aggressive style that didn't give the better team the room and the time to outplay them decision-wise and outplay them macro-wise to get to a point where they could easily choke them out of a game. Instead, the Vietnamese team would kind of snowball in some of their games and actually have a chance at winning. So anyways, we ended up on a whole nother video topic, but I hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys enjoyed. Good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.